You're going to struggle.
So you'll need to surround yourself with people you trust.
You're a good man with a good heart. And it's hard for a good man to be king.
Yeah. Prophet.
Shabbat Shalom, family. It's your boy Solemn Prophet, and we are here with Professor S. And this is another episode of Shabbat Talk.
Shabbat Shalom.
Before we get started, absolutely, Shabbat Shalom. Before we get started, go ahead and hit the like button. Go ahead and share this video. You know what I'm saying? If you guys got any questions, go ahead and hit those comments down below. And this week, we're going to do a little bit different. A brother of ours, obviously we know everything happens on the most highest time, but you know, I personally feel like this brother left us too soon. An amazing brother in the walk in the faith, an amazing scholar, just an all-around good dude, man. Brother Rob Skiba. So what we're gonna do is occasionally throughout the weeks, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a step back from the weekly topics that we cover, and what we'll do is we'll tackle a topic of Rob Skiba. And so we'll watch one of his videos, his lessons, his breakdowns. A lot of times he has other brothers on the call, like me and Joe do this. He has other brothers on his calls as well. And we'll, portion it out so it's not too long, because some of his videos are 2-3 hours long. But we'll portion it out and we'll cover and we'll give commentary and dialogue. And I'm sure a lot of the topics and the specific verses and stuff that he brings out, it'll be something that, we be able to speak to, or you might pull something out from us that we didn't even know. So we're all going to watch it together. We're all going to learn together, give comments, give our commentary. Like I said, if Rob drops something that you have a question about, feel free to, again, drop a comment. But we're going to watch this all together. And some of these videos I haven't even seen. This particular video, Professor S shot it over to me. So I kept it and I didn't even watch it. So we're going to be watching it together for the first time. And shoot, without further ado, Joe, did you want to add anything to it? Because I know, man, listen, this brother is so influential.
I actually hadn't seen this particular video since I think it was right before Rob passed. Right before he passed, I had watched this video and I thought it was really good. So I hadn't seen it in a long time. And usually when I watch videos, I'm driving or listen to videos, commentaries and stuff, it's when I'm driving. So I don't, I'm also distracted, so I don't fully absorb everything that's being said. So, I think it'll be really good to listen to this and provide some commentary.
Absolutely. All right, let's go. Let's get it, man. Big shout out to Rob Skiba.
Yes, rest in peace.
Shout out to Rob Skiba. All right, let me share my screen real quick. All right. Hey, Joe, let me know if you can hear this audio so I know I got everything set up right.
Yeah.
Now is the time to cross over from Ashes.
I can, but it's really low.
It's really low?
Uh-huh.
Is that better?
You have been forged in the fire of adversity.
It's better. It's still pretty low.
It's still pretty low? Okay, I'm going to change the settings on the share. This should do the trick. What about this?
Called to return to our.
That might even be a little too loud now.
All right, I'll turn it down just a tad.
Our first love. Follow the ancient paths as we discover the hidden word of Yahuwah. This is Crossing Over with Jessica Arianes. Now is the time to cross over from ashes to beauty. We have been forged in the fire of adversity, called to return to our first love. Follow the ancient paths as we discover the hidden word of Yahuwah. This is Crossing Over with Jessica Arianes.
Shalom, shalom, shalom. Welcome, everyone, to Crossing Over. I'm your host, Jessica Arianes, and with me today, I have two special guests. I have Rob Skiba, author, and do you also produce the work, or is someone else producing the Seed series?
Oh, yeah, I'm producing it.
Yeah, author, producer, writer. No, that's the same as author, yeah. So we have Rob Skiba with us, and then we also have Adam Fink of Parable of the Vineyard. Thank you both for joining me today.
Shalom.
Shalom.
Your mic's a little low, Adam.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll get a little closer. Shalom. Is that better?
Kind of. Can you hear him, Rob?
Yeah.
Can? Is it my mic? My ear? Say testing.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Testing.
All right, you're
Yeah, he does sound lower.
You sound really low.
Yeah.
Okay. How about now?
That's better. Much better.
Okay. Okay. Sorry about that.
All right. Well, I want to thank you both for joining me, especially on such short notice. However, I felt an urgency to discuss some of the topics we're going to discuss today, primarily because of the effect that these topics or issues are having on the multitude of believers, those who are new, those who have been walking in the way for years, whatever the case is. But we do see, Rob called it an endemic last night. It is an endemic that's taking place, and is also scriptural. I believe that this is part of the preparation of the coming anti-Messiah who is setting himself up. And part of that setup is, well, we see what happening. We see something happening first, which is this great falling away, right? This apostasy that takes place. And then, of course, we see that these certain actors will emerge on the scene. And so we're going to talk about some of those things today. And Robin.
My apologies, family. I don't know why I didn't even mention it. We just started playing the video. As the title on the YouTube channel says, when questioning Paul leads to denying Messiah. This is the topic for tonight. I just realized we didn't even mention the topic. Yeah, so we're going to watch this video and they're going to go into it. I don't know what they're about to pull out, but I know I've addressed this topic on my channel. I know Joe has addressed this topic in various conversations with other people, including myself. I'm very passionate about this topic. You know, when you start to question Paul's writings, his epistles, the integrity of Paul as a person, as an apostle, then you start to question other things in the New Testament. And then eventually you kind of just write off the entire New Testament altogether and then focus solely on the Old Testament. And obviously when you do that, you're cutting out a lot of what's written about the Messiah, because you're cutting out the Gospels and Acts and all of the epistles that reference the Messiah. Now, you can still have the Messiah if you cut out the New Testament. However, you have him in a very much reduced role, because the Messiah is evident in the Old Testament as well. I'm not sure if they're going to bring that out, but I've also provided proof as well. But when you want to get to the essence of who Messiah is and in detail, and witness the accounts that were witnessed of him, that's all New Testament. So when you cut that out, you're cutting a lot of cutting a huge piece of the pie out. But yeah, this is the topic.
Lots of people, lots of people will say that Paul's a false apostle. And to be completely honest, I had wrestled with that myself. You know what I'm saying? Because he does seem to be contradicting the Torah a lot. I'm pretty sure, like I said, it's been a long time since I've seen this. I don't remember everything they get into, but I'm pretty sure they talked about it in the video. But basically, it comes from a misunderstanding of Paul. As Peter says, that Paul is hard to understand, and those who are unlearned will twist his words to their own destruction and fall into the error of lawlessness. So you've got Peter endorsing Paul, saying, "Look, he's right, but you've got to understand what he's talking about in order to understand what he means. Otherwise, if you don't have the foundation So I would personally say that I don't think any new believer should be reading Paul. You should definitely be a seasoned believer before starting to read Paul, because Paul was, I mean, he was very well learned in Scripture. Being that he was a student of Gamaliel. In order to even be a student of Gamaliel, you had to have the entire Old Testament memorized word for word and be able to cross-reference different stuff in your head, right? You couldn't just, it wasn't like you could just go up and study under Gamaliel. He was like the most prestigious of the prestigious rabbis, in a modern kind of analogy for that would be like you got community college, then you've got your decent universities, and then you got your really prestigious universities that you don't get into unless you're like perfect grade point average and all this kind of stuff.
Or your family's well connected.
Yeah, or your family's well connected, right? So it's you've got exclusive universities, prestigious universities, and a community college. So it's like Gamaliel was like the exclusive university for learning, not like an average rabbi. You know what I'm saying? So Paul had all of this. He was not unlearned or anything. And if you are unlearned, as Peter says, you can easily misunderstand what Paul's saying and not get the message he's trying to relay. So yeah, I guess we'll continue from there.
Absolutely.
And I were having a discussion last night. It was a very in-depth discussion. Hopefully we'll be able to touch on some of those things this morning. So the first one is the man of lawlessness. And so I don't know where you are, both of you, I don't know where you are in regards to that timeline. I know, Adam, you put out a lot of content. You just actually did a series on the book of Revelation, right? Chapter by chapter, verse by verse.
Yes.
Yeah. So where do you feel we're at in regards to this timeline?
Man, every time I've thought that we're like right there, it's just like we've got more time. So, I'm at the place as far as timing, I've got to be just fully honest. I couldn't tell you if we're 2 days away, 2 weeks away, 2 months away, 20 years away. I couldn't tell you. We may have a lot more time than we think. But, that doesn't change what we're supposed to be doing as far as being prepared, as far as keeping the commandments, our faith in the Most High through his son, Messiah Yahusha. But I mean, obviously that time is coming. And it is interesting. You said, falling away, the falling away has happened since Messiah Yahusha, has ascended, and the early apostles died off, and the Roman Catholic Church came in and swooped in doctrine and changed everything. But it is interesting that here we are in these last days, how much time we have, that first he's regathering us back to himself, back to keeping the commandments. But now even in this small community, there's a separating, there's a falling away from the truth. And really, I mean, obviously what we'll be talking about a little bit later or at some point, there's kind of a movement within this movement of now not needing Messiah Yahusha, which is quite alarming. But so to answer your question, I don't know. I don't know how much time we have here and where he's at, but certainly there's a spirit of Antichrist moving around, because 1 John 22 basically says that the person that denies Messiah Yahusha is the spirit of Antichrist, and so
perfect.
That's we're here.
Yeah, we're there.
We're here.
That's true. Absolutely. What do you think, Rob?
Something that occurred to me when Adam was talking that I actually literally never thought about until just now, and that is that we talk about the last days, right? And I think most of us, when we think last days, our mind immediately goes to tribulation period. And yet there was an understanding of last days in the New Testament, at the time that the New Testament authors were writing. And, I've always been like kind of confused by that, and some people use that to say, well, the people have been saying that for 2,000 years. And Peter says in the last days, people are going to mock, where is the promise of his return and all that? Yeah. But the thought occurred to me because, before we went on the air, we were talking about sort of like biorhythms, that from the time that you're born you know, our body has cycles of build up and then decline, you know, peak and lows,
Highs and lows. Yeah.
highs and lows. And so I was just kind of thinking about that wave that the various cycles of our body goes through. And I thought, well, wait a minute. What if when it refers to the last days, it's referring to there was the first days where the 4,000-ish years build up from creation to Messiah. And then you sort of over the hill, you're on the downslide from that point to the last days. So you had first days to the peak, and then last days to the end, which will come. So you go from creation to destruction and then renewal again. Never thought about that until like literally just now. And I was like, well, yeah, we even say it in our own lives. Like I'm 51 years old. We say, okay, you're over the hill, right? It's like,
hey, that's an interesting point. I never even thought of it that way as well. Not saying that that's correct, but that's an interesting point to kind of look at in regards to like a timeline, right? From creation to Messiah, and Messiah being the peak, and then everything after Messiah is that slow. Like if you ever took a statistics class, or even in certain math classes, you have what's called a bell curve. And in the middle of that bell curve is kind of shaped where on each end it's low and it gradually gets up and then it curves over and then it's identical on the other side. So it swoops out. And so your middle is actually your average. And then the further you get away from that average is the probability of things happening the least, with the far ends being like the 1 percentile on each end. The 1%, the 1 percentile and the 99th percentile. But if you think of it in that frame of mind, where creation is all the way over here, and then you have the build up into Messiah, and Messiah is the peak, that median, that average, and then after you get past the average, it begins to close down, where the rest, you know, we're on that this side, you know, we're on that tail end. And who knows how long of a time period that tail end is. But to understand that, you know, in our lives, we know that the Messiah has come and gone. So definitely we shouldn't be thinking on, I'm trying to get my camera right, this side, right? We're definitely over on this side. So whether the end of days and the tribulation and everything comes tomorrow or in 30 years or even 100 years, we need to be preparing for that, you know. And even if it's not going to happen in our lifetime, we need to prepare for what's going to happen in our lifetime, because we see things, and we see the news, we see all of these things happening, and we need to prepare for that. And what we do today and in our lifetime is going to prepare and set up our children and the next generations to have a better established, closer to the Father type of lifestyle when the tribulation finally hits. Because if it hits now, a lot of us is going to be screwed, because a lot of us ain't ready for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's like it's kind of similar to what what it says in 2 Esdras about how the earth is like a woman. It likens the earth to a woman, and it says that the reason the firstborn was given the inheritance and all this kind of stuff is because the firstborn was the strongest, right? And then as you get older, your offspring are going to be weaker and weaker, because you were weaker when you had them, right? And it does talk about that in 2 Esdras. I can't remember exactly. I read it a couple years ago, where it talks about the earth getting old and producing us as the offspring, quote unquote, in the analogy, will become weaker and weaker and weaker as that happens. So in that sense, I would say, yeah, we are in the last days. We've been in the last days since Messiah, you know, man. So
absolutely. If you don't know who Rob Skiba is, I highly, highly, highly encourage you to go to YouTube, type in Rob Skiba, ROBSKIBA, and just see a lot of the content that he's posted. Even though he's no longer with us, he still has tons, months,
Oh, yeah.
years of content that you could just go through and, you know, examine for yourself. But all right, let's go ahead and continue this.
You have the peak years of your life, and then you start hitting around the 40 to 50 point, and you're just like, okay, it's all downhill from here, right? So, hopefully I've got another 30 plus years, maybe, on the backside of the hill, 80th by strength, according to Psalm 90 verse 10, right?
That's right.
But if I use that analogy, then, sort of my first days were from birth to, let's say 35, 40 years old. And I'm in my last days because I'm on the downside of the hill, So, I'm just thinking out loud. This is just on the cuff right now. I'm thinking, well, maybe that's a better way of looking at the last days instead of always trying to, pin a date,
That's absolutely.
As far as the man of lawlessness and when he's going to be here, well, there's been a spirit of lawlessness that's been around, pretty much from the garden, and there's been a spirit of Antichrist pretty much since Christ walked the earth. There were Antichrists, in the days of the apostles, Antichrists, plural. But we know that there's going to be a Antichrist that's going to show up. There's going to be the man of lawlessness, the man of sin, the man of perdition,
right,
the beast. And, if anybody's followed my research, they know who I think that is. Revelation 17, I think, gives you some significant clues. And that entity is coming up from the bottomless pit. So it's not coming from Kenya, Hawaii, the Vatican, or New York, or anywhere else. A lot of people like to, assign an Antichrist character his origin. And that doesn't happen until the bottomless pit is open. Well, when is the bottomless pit open? Revelation 9 says the bottomless pit is open when an angel's at the fifth trumpet, angel's given a key to the shaft of the bottomless pit, and it's opened, and then the leader comes out. His name is Apollyon, Abaddon in Hebrew. So, I mean,
the destroyer.
I think the scripture just gave you the name of the Antichrist, the beast that comes out of the bottomless pit by name. And there's quite a bit that needs to happen before we see the fifth trumpet go off. So
absolutely.
How much time?
I think it's interesting. Yeah. So I think it's interesting you talk about this particular entity in regards to the multitude of antichrists that existed at that time and still exist today. If we look at even the terminology of antichrist in the Greek and even in the Latin, but what we find is that this means against the Mashiach or against the anointing. So of course, there were those who were opposing Yahusha as the anointed one. Those would have been antichrist or against the anointing. But in 2 Thessalonians, it talks specifically about an entity or an individual who will exalt himself above all that is called Yahuwah or that is worshipped, so that he himself sits as Yahuwah in the temple, showing himself to that he is Yahuwah. So we see a replacement there. We see something more than just opposing Yahusha as the anointed one. But it's interesting because, again, what is this falling away? Well, that word falling away is apo, from the Greek word to take off, right? Like apocalypse, to remove the veil, to take off. So apo and then stasia, right? Which basically means to depart or to forsake something. And I found that it was interesting. I went and looked into this word, and this word wasn't specifically referring to genuine believers who depart from the faith, but more certain teachers and professors of the faith who, without divine grace, succumb to the satanic deception of the Antichrist, again, opposing the anointing of Yahusha. That's, I think, important. So if those who are truly Mashiachs and through the Ruach have become members of his body, according to 1 Corinthians 12:13, if they could, in fact, be detached, then the assurance that Yahusha gives to his own will not perish, that his own will not perish, well, then this would be made null and void. You can find that in Yehukanan 10:28-29. So our faith is in Yahusha's promise that we, those who are truly his, genuinely attached to him through the Ruach, yoked to him in the Ruach, that he will not allow us to perish under this satanic guise. But what's interesting is that back in the day, especially during this time that it was written in 2 Thessalonians, many people were actually falling away from the law that was given to Moses by Yahuwah. So people were actually falling away from that, embracing Yahusha only, right? They wanted to be segregated from the law, from those which were called Judaizers at that time. So they didn't want to be called a Judaizer. They were solely Christians. And this was the falling away I think Paul was talking about. But what's interesting is that we see the opposite of that happening today. And if you gentlemen want to talk about that for just a minute, but we see that the opposite is happening. People are actually removing themselves from the testimony of Yahusha and embracing only the Torah or the commandments of Yah. And I believe that that is a great fallacy. And not only that, but it's salvific and it's very dangerous. Adam, do you have anything?
Yes. This walk is very narrow, as we're finding out more and more each day, each week. And, I've often said that that the way, I don't even remember who I got this from, but I gleaned this from somebody, and it made total sense. But the way has two gutters to it. On the, like if you like in a bowling alley, you've got gutters on each side. But anyways, let's imagine the path, the way to salvation is narrow, and it's got a gutter, like a place to fall on the left side or the right side. And I've often said that Judaism is a gutter on one side, and modern day false version of Christianity is a gutter on the other side. But you even more specifically, I think you just kind of said it, is that even in this walk, this called out assembly that we've been gathering to, which is people coming out of any kind of false religion, coming back to the Father through his Son and his offering, and coming back to keeping the Torah, you're starting to see, like you said, people that are well, even like I said, modern day Christianity, that you said are only worshiping the Son and not even acknowledging the Father, or even have that weird dynamic that, is the Son the Father, all that kind of stuff. But, even Messiah Yahushua himself said, he taught us to worship the Father, to pray to the Father, right? And that people that have gone the way of denying Messiah will use that straw man and call it idolatry, call that, worshiping the Son, or
I'm sorry. Hey, that is an amazing analogy. That is an amazing analogy. And I bowl. I'm a big bowler. I'm a big time bowler. So that resonated with me. But when you think about it, because a lot of people don't even really know this. So this is kind of my bowling nerd coming out right now, right? So like he gave you the example. You have the lane. You have a gutter on each side. And he's basically saying non-Messianic Judaism is in the far left gutter. And then modern day Christianity is on the far right, right? So you have only law, only Torah on the left-hand side, and only Messiah on the right-hand side. Mm-hmm. And when you are trying to get a strike, right, you're trying to stay as close to that middle line as possible. Mm-hmm. Slightly to the right or to the left of that. Slightly to the right will give you a standard strike. Slightly to the left of that will give you what's called a Brooklyn strike, right? Because if you hit it right in the middle, you run the risk of getting a split, right? But you want to be somewhere in that middle area, okay? And in the middle area is where the truth lies. Yeah. And the further you get away from that middle area, that strike zone, to either direction, either closer towards the Torah only or closer towards the Messiah only, the further you get away from that strike zone, you run the risk of not hitting the mark. And missing and losing, and that's actually what the Torah means, is to hit the mark, right? It means to hit the mark. It's kind of the idea of it is with archery, right? You launch your arrows, you're shooting your arrows, and you want to hit the mark. You don't want to be off the bullseye completely, but it's a similar analogy. You want to hit the bullseye. You don't want to be shooting off to the left or to the right. And then what's to say over and over again in the Torah? It says, do not go either to the right or to the left, right? And just keep saying that over and over again, which I think is very appropriate for the straight and narrow, because it's narrow and you don't want to go off to the right or to the left, because there's this narrow little path that's going to get you to the end goal, right? Yeah. I think that was so profound. Like, because I bowl, like I said, I bowl. So I'm like, I got scenarios running in my mind, and my mind is like blown right now. Like, because for example, if you are like left-handed, a left-handed bowler, chances are you're going to start on the left side and throw the ball, and it's going to be directed at that center strike zone area. Like I said earlier, some people have curves in their balls where they'll start in the middle or on the right, throw it all the way to the left, and it'll curve and come in, and vice versa with right-handed. Like I'm a right-handed bowler, so I stand far left. I throw my ball all the way to the right, and my ball curves and snatches back and hits the strike zone. Like that's the way I throw the ball, right? But then you have everything in between. Some people start in the middle and they throw a straight ball down the middle and hoping that it curves off to the left or to the right at the last minute, or they'll start slightly in the middle but off to that side so that they'll throw a straight ball and hit that strike zone. Obviously, in a perfect world, in regards to, you know, biblical understanding and theology, you want to be starting in that strike zone and just continuously stay within that strike zone, not not falling away to the left or to the right.
That's the thing, though, and the profundity of this analogy is that most people don't start that way. You know what I'm saying? Exactly. Most people don't start that way. You know, we're constantly having to try to correct, and what you want to do is, you know, especially if you didn't start off that way, which I would actually venture to say no one really does, but you'd want to correct. See, like whenever I bowl, I like bowling too.
Right.
We need to go bowling sometime, dude.
I'm down. Say less.
Yeah. But you know, I actually start off a little bit to the right and then get the ball going more towards the center. So at the end, it comes back around, hits the pin. You know what I'm saying? And so
right. I know a couple bowlers like that.
Mm-hmm. So you know, and that's what we've got to do, regardless of where we start from, right? But you don't want to get stuck in the gutter, because either of these extremes can get you stuck in the gutter. And you know, I mean, it's pretty rare. I mean, I've actually had it happen where I screwed up and got in the gutter, and then it bounced back out of the gutter, and I still got a strike. You know, that happens occasionally, but you know, and it can happen, but you still want to try to avoid getting stuck in the gutter. And
it's very difficult to get out of the gutter, is what he's trying to say.
And either of these extremes, if you deny Messiah and say, oh, it's only the Torah, right? Or on the other hand, you deny the Torah and you say, oh no, we don't have to do that, it's only Messiah. Then you're in one of the gutters, and
absolutely.
They're pretty hard to get out of.
Yeah. And then another thing to note is on the actual lane itself, if you like walk up to where that line is and you look down, and they're depending on the bowling alley and how the lanes are set up, they'll have another set of these as well back to where you begin your approach. But there's hash marks, and the hash marks are evenly spaced away from the center. And there's typically about 4 or 5 hash marks, or sometimes they're dots, and they line up to hash marks that's down the lane, like right before you hit to the last 10, 15 feet of lane before the pins. And it'll allow you to line up yourself. So you can put your foot on one of the hash marks or one of the dots and then begin to start your throw. And you can aim at the hash marks that are down the lane, right? And each of those hash marks, you know, it may be a certain level, like the way I equate it is to a certain level of understanding, right? So you may be on the far left, right, to Torah only, but you might not be so far to being in the gutter. You may be at the second or third hash mark away from the center. So you have a certain level of understanding that's keeping you out of that gutter area, which gives you room to be able to move forward closer to that middle to where you really need to be, and vice versa. I know some Christians that aren't so far in the gutter on the right-hand side. They still understand the importance of Torah and its place to an extent. They might not have the same understanding of Torah as, let's say, me or you, but they have that understanding, like it's there for a reason, you know what I mean? And they're on that second or third hash mark off the center, but to the right-hand side. And so all it takes is a little bit of study, a little bit of, you know, guidance letting the Ruach guide you to get back to that center strike zone area. And so this bowling analogy has got me. I'm a firm believer of not inventing the wheel. This bowling analogy is going into my toolbox, so to speak. I'm definitely using this. I got the river analogy on the topic of free will, but this bowling analogy is perfect for this. I'm gonna just get off my soapbox. You got something else you want to put on this?
No, I think that's good.
Okay, yeah, this was fire right here.
Or even believing in the Son is idolatry. And straw men are obviously used for that reason, to kind of put up a false paradigm to show that what they're putting forth is true. But anyway, so yeah, long story short, the way is narrow, and it is, really, the gospel that I've come to understand, if I could, summarize what I think the truth is being reconciled to the Father through His Son, who came and offered Himself for us, and believing in Him. And we can't deny where almost all of us started our faith at, which was looking upon the cross or the stake or the tree, whatever you want to call it. I know there's a lot of contention there. I'm not going to go there today, but looking upon that act that He did for us, and it did something to us in our heart. That brought us back to belief and wanting to learn more about the Word. And as He's opened up our understanding, He's, Psalm 119:18, He's opening our eyes to the wondrous matters out of His Torah and giving us a heart that wants to, and the Ruach, which the whole purpose of the Ruach was to guide us into all truth, which is not guiding us into all a bunch of conspiracy theories.
Yeah, that's right.
Which are nice. Those are all great vehicles that brought us here, but it's to guide us into the truth, capital T. So anyways, that's how narrow the walk is, and people unfortunately are all over the place and have fallen in those gutters all over the place, and it's happening even more so now, and it's going to continue to happen because unfortunately Satan is good at what he does. I don't like giving him props, but he obviously, when the Most High made him, he obviously made a worthy adversary. He didn't make some schmuck. Think about it. He created him, and he knew, just as he knew when he created man, he knew that man would eventually not keep his commandments and would leave the garden. That's why he made the sun, the moon, the stars, and everything the way he made it. But he obviously, when he made Hasatan, he knew. It said he made him one of, I think it was Ezekiel 28, wasn't it? Doesn't it say he made him was one of the most beautiful creatures in creation?
That's right.
So he knew he made a worthy adversary, and obviously he's doing his job now, unfortunately, very well. So this is certainly a time to recognize that the adversary is good at what he does, and that we have to just continue in this faith, in this narrow way, and not deviate either to the left hand or to the right, regardless of what others may say.
Hallelujah. You made so many good points. Actually, Rob, we talked about these things, did we not? So praise Yah that the Ruach is moving in our midst today. And Rob, actually, let me ask you. So he brought up a bunch of good points, which I'm sure you can respond to, but let's focus first on false Christianity, or the false, what happened? What happened, Rob? There was one, right? What happened? What is different from then ancient, or the times of antiquity, and the times that we live in today in regards to our faith? Who came in, who perpetrated? Was there an intentional deception? Were scribes responsible? Were certain entities such as Rome responsible? We'll talk about that in just a second. But if you don't know what Judaizer means, please go look it up. But for the most part, let's focus on the fact that at that time that that Paul and the disciples were actually ministering reconciliation to the covenant through the blood of Mashiach, which is where the power is, because that power that resides in Yahusha is the Ruach, and that Ruach, or the spirit of the law, was actually being restored, not just the letter, but combined. I like what Adam said about two gutters. So you have, the pattern of righteousness, the image, the pattern of righteousness, but then you have the the context, you have the power to perform, to express, and to bring forth that righteousness. And that all exists in Yahusha because his blood was alive. His testimony was a living testimony, and he was the expressed image of fidelity. He kept the vows, and he was faithful, the word says, unto death. So remember, certain believers among the Jews were departing at that time from the laws of Moses while coming to Yahusha. They had decided that they should separate themselves from the law, i.e., their Judaistic practices, for they were in a new dispensation. And I want you to focus on that, Rob. Again, this new dispensation, right? Under grace. And so they were not Judaizing believers, but believers standing apart from Moses. So again, this was first initially that falling away that was taking place then, but we also see a falling away taking place now. And before you go, Rob, you all were talking about the timing and how can we differentiate between this act and that act and these events that are taking place and sort of bring them all together to form a pattern or a proper view. Well, what's interesting is that women, when they are going through labor, there are various stages of labor, and those birthing pains, and only a specialist can discern which stage she's in. But if we look at that from that perspective, if we look at everything that's going on from that perspective, we can see that there are some birth pangs that are taking place. There's some contractions, and the contractions seem to be getting more intense. The frequency and the intensity is become greater. And so I look at that, and I think, just like Adam said, it is important. It behooves us to prepare not only physically and externally, but to prepare our minds and our hearts, because there is an aggressive entity that is vying for our souls, and that is that Antichrist spirit, or the spirit of this age, if you will, who is striving against the saints, warring against our souls, so that we would no longer adhere to the power for salvation. So go ahead, Rob. You want to talk about false Christianity? What happened?
Oh boy.
What happened?
Both of you said so much that my head's going ping, ping. I'm like ricochet rabbits in my head right now.
That's why I have my notepad here, because Adam was just boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, I'm like, oh man, we're right there. I do want to address the gutter issue. First time I heard that described was in this book right here, Epidemic: Examining the Infected Roots of Judaism and Christianity. How do we find God with all this mess, by Dr. Russ Hauk. He was somebody that I met fairly early on in my walk in Torah, and several people had given me this book, like, Rob, you got to read this book, like just as I was coming into Sabbath and understanding that, this stuff is still for today, the feasts, all that stuff. And interestingly enough, I was at a Nephilim conference in Lubbock, Texas, and somebody was sitting in front of me, just started talking, and she had this book, and I'm like, man, this is like the third person like in a month that's telling me I got to read this book. So I finally ended up getting the book, and I will say, I wish that he had structured the book a little bit differently and saved some of his commentary for later and did a build up to it, because for people who are in standard Christianity, this book can be quite offensive if you're just getting into it. And he'll say things like, Yeshua or Jesus is not the Messiah. Well, immediately I'm like, this guy's full of it. I literally threw that book across the room several times. Just, this guy's full of it. And every time I threw the book across the room, I felt like the Holy Spirit's like, go pick it up, keep reading. And what I came to understand, he's a Messianic Jewish believer. And what he was saying is, in the mind of a Jewish person, the word Messiah, yes, it means anointed one, but they hear king, ruling and reigning king, which they were even expecting Yeshua to do when he was here, right? When are you going to set up the kingdom? He's like, yeah, it's not quite yet. And so when he didn't do what they wanted him to do, which was overthrow the Romans and all their enemies and set up shop as a new kingdom here, many of them rejected him, And so what he was trying to say in the book is, like, Christians, if you want to reach the Jew, you got to understand the terminology and you got to understand what's in their head. And when I finally understood what Dr. Hauk was saying, I could agree with it. you know, as a believer, and say, yeah, he is King of Kings, Lord of Lords. He's ruling and reigning in my heart, and he's in heaven, but he has not physically set up shop on this earth as a ruling and reigning king just yet. So with that, and he points out, like, look how many times he's referred to as the Lamb in the book of Revelation, end times, right? I think he's only the lion like once or twice, and the rest it's all the Lamb. So he's still serving in that function, in that capacity at this moment right there.
Great point.
So, you know, he was bringing up lots of things, but all that to say, he had an illustration of just a simple illustration of like a hill with a straight and narrow path going off to the sunset, you know, just beautiful, nice, you know, road off to the sunset. But you had two ditches on either side. One is pagan Christianity and one is rabbinic Judaism. And he's saying, you know, many times people come out of pagan Christianity and you start to realize, hey, you know, Xmas and Ishtar Day and all that has nothing to do with my Savior, and Sabbath is still important and all this stuff. And you start climbing up the hill and you get on the straight and narrow path and you're on that for a little while, and then whoop, you slide off into rabbinic Judaism. You know, and then you have the rabbinic Jews that discover their Messiah, and they climb up on the path, they're on the straight and narrow. Next thing you know, they slide off and they're like, oh, I don't really need to keep, I can start eating pork, I can start having Xmas, I can have, you know, Nimrod boners in my practice on Sabbath. You know, and I'm crude about
it's true.
I'm crude about that because
let's be real.
Let's be real. The Christmas trees are found.
All right, so okay, full disclosure, as he was saying about the book, how he started reading the book and it upset him and he throws the book, it just reminded me, like, it was confirmation. I did at some point see this video before.
Oh yeah,
but it was probably at least 2-3 years ago. So it feels like I'm watching it for the first time, but there's some subtle familiar points that they're making it.
That looks simple.
It is what it is.
You know,
commentary still authentic.
So the trick is, how do you put the guardrails on the straight and narrow path so that whichever direction you came onto it from, you don't slide off onto the other side.
Yeah,
and I've seen a lot of that happen in both ways. You know, you're talking about when Christianity first, you know, went off course. I don't know if you guys have probably seen the documentary The Way. I don't know if your audience has or not.
Mm-hmm.
You know, many different people within the community were interviewed to describe, you know, our walk and how we came to where we are now and stuff like that. And, you know, most of us came from, you know, what I now refer to as pagan Christianity, where, you know, we had a form of godliness, and I believe it was because we were blinded intentionally by God, by Yahuwah. We have been blinded for 2,730 years. Where do I get that from? Ezekiel 4 talks about the prophet laying on his side for 390 days, a day representing a year. That's the punishment for the northern kingdom when they went into exile. Well, Leviticus 26 says if you don't learn your lesson when Yahuwah chastises you, you get 7 times the judgment. Well, the southern kingdom, they went to, you know, Babylon for 70 years. They repented and they got to go back. You know, they repented, so they got to go back. The northern kingdom was exiled and they didn't repent, so they got 7 times more the judgment. Which means, I believe, this is just Rob Skiba's opinion here, I believe that we were in a God-prescribed blindness for 2,730 years that was compounded by the likes of Marcion, you know, some of these early people that show up in the time period of the so-called early church fathers, that, you know, he would read the Old Testament and, you know, there's Yahuwah like, kill the women, kill the children, kill the animals, wipe out everything, you know, and this, you know, if you don't understand Genesis 6 and what's going on there, it's very easy to slide into an opinion that the God of the Old Testament is not good. You know, he's a schizophrenic, genocidal maniac.
Dictator, yeah.
You know,
megalomaniac, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot you need to understand, sort of going into it, in order to understand what's happening. You know, and so there was this hyper grace message, you know, at the expense of the law. And I maintain you have to have both. You know, grace without the law is anarchy, and law without grace is tyranny. You know,
perfect.
You got to have both to work together. You know. So around the time of Marcion, you have this throwing off of anything that had to do with the Old Testament. Let's just have Jesus, right? You
said that before. I think you said that at the retreat when we were talking about law versus grace. I think you quoted him directly.
You have to have both of them. You have to have both of them. It might have been Rob. It probably was Rob Skiba that I got that from, actually.
I mean, he's had so many quotables.
Yeah, right. Yep.
He solves everything. He did it all, so we don't have to do anything, you know. And that's really convenient for people who came from legitimate paganism as they're coming into the faith and say, "Oh, I kind of like some of those old things we used to do. Cool, good thing it's covered under grace," you know. And it was solidified and codified, in fact, under Constantine. You know, so you get about from Marcion, I forget when he was around, but from Marcion till 300 AD ish. You have this slide into accepting more and more paganism. You know, what a genius plan of the enemy, right? If the enemy knew or came to figure out, okay, this Messiah thing finally happened, he rose from the dead, what do I do about this? As people are coming into this faith, I've got to start corrupting that as much as possible. And isn't it convenient that Yahuwah has blinded them for 2,730 years? Cool. Mm-hmm. You know, but at the end of that 2,730 years, we get to, roughly the 2009, 2010 timeframe, and I get those numbers from roughly 720, 721 BC when they went into captivity. Flash forward 2,730 years, you end up in about the 2009-ish time period, when all of a sudden, with no leader, no denomination, no religious television channel or anything like that, people all over the world just all of a sudden woke up and realized their Bible doesn't start in Matthew. Galatians is not the only book in their Bible, and they're like, wait a minute, I'm going to go back to the beginning here. And they go back to Genesis and they start reading forward, and they're like, man, the Sabbath thing, I think I should be doing that still. So they start keeping the Sabbath. They were like, the Moedim, he keeps using words like forever, perpetual, in all your generations. Maybe forever means forever. Maybe we should still be doing this stuff. And then you start looking into the Xmas and Ishtar Day, Christmas and Easter and all that stuff, and you're like, I don't want anything to do with that. I'm going to trade 2 beast feasts and get the 7 Moedim plus a Sabbath. Trade 2, get 8. What a good deal, right? So all this started to happen roughly in 2009, 2010, when the veil was removed, the scales were removed, people's eyes were open, people's hearts were open, and they started returning back to Torah. They had both, as Revelation said. They had the testimony of Jesus Christ and the commandments, keeping of the commandments. But something has interfered with that now, where people are starting, because they're bringing over a lot of pagan Christianity into their Torah walk.
There it is. This
is the problem. They're bringing a lot of these Christian dogma, starting from Marcion through Constantine and forward. They're bringing through the Catholic Church largely. I grew up Baptist, but many of these people are just Catholic light, when you consider the doctrines that they're doing. We bring those over, we have those mindsets, and then we start trying to keep Torah, start reading Torah, and all of a sudden there's a conflict. And people are like, well, Torah says this, but I believe this, and these aren't compatible. What am I going to do? And because people get so passionate about keeping Torah and wanting to walk in the ways of the Father, which Yeshua always pointed to and always said we should do, they start to think, because of pagan Christianity, in my opinion, that the things in Christianity are in conflict with this, largely because of teachings of Paul that are grossly misrepresented in many cases. They say, well, I got to get rid of Paul. And this is a domino effect that I've seen happen so many times. The same thing happens every time. You reject Paul. Okay, first you start questioning Paul. Then you start rejecting Paul. When you reject Paul, you reject 2/3 of the New Testament. When you reject 2/3 of the New Testament and you reject Paul, you also have to reject the testimony of Ananias, because he was the guy that Jesus said, hey, go heal him. Yeshua said, go remove the scales off his eyes, heal him, and tell him what I've called him to do. So he literally got his marching orders from Christ himself to give to Paul, right? Barnabas came along later and validated Paul to the apostles who were, this guy was killing Christians before. Barnabas, hey, yeah, it's all good now. Luke is the guy that was going along as his chronographer or whatever, describing what he did, his historian. Well, so now you have to question, if you question Paul, you got to question the testimony of Ananias, of Barnabas, of Luke. If you question Luke, you got to throw out the entire book of Acts and the Gospel of Luke. And if you throw out the Gospel of Luke, you're going to start questioning Matthew, Mark, and John, because they're almost all the same.
You go, Rob.
And it's happening out there.
Yeah.
And
then the next
so good.
You throw out the entire New Testament and you throw out the Messiah.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Sure.
Well, I'll cap it off with this. That's where many are right now. Question Paul, ditch Paul. Question the New Testament, ditch the New Testament. Question Messiah, ditch Messiah. Then you say, well, I'm just good by keeping the Torah. Well, a logical question is, how are you keeping Torah? You can't keep Torah right now. Who's your Levitical priest? Where's your temple? What are you doing to the sacrifices for your sins and everything? What are you doing? You know, you can't. And then eventually you have to just say, I can't even keep the Torah. You throw the whole thing out. And then you start looking at, the Sumerian myths and stuff like that. Well, this is just the same as the Code of Hammurabi and whatever. And then you just throw the whole thing out and become a Buddhist or something,
Okay, let's get there in just a second because we have a lot more to cover and we're going to get into the mythology stories. But Adam, go ahead. You want to respond? Please do.
I was just going to say, I was kind of put into a position of looking re-examining Paul earlier. Actually, it's been a year almost, and really sought the Father on this topic, and a lot of prayer, a lot of fasting, because I did not want to get it wrong. I did not, and even to this day, there's some things that I have some questions about Paul. And we won't need to get into it today, but I really felt that the Father was like, Paul is true. Paul is true. I believe the book of Acts is true. I really do. And I, unfortunately, I did a very long live stream about this a couple months ago now, a month ago, where I just basically laid out my heart on Paul and where I'm at. And I still have, a lot of concerns and some questions on certain things like circumcision and other things. But again, I don't want to go there today. But I did put out a warning that I really felt like the Father was saying is, you accuse Paul, and it's not going to turn out well. It's not going to turn out well for you. Imagine like a heavenly court, and you are putting Paul on trial. Imagine the Most High is seated there as the judge, and you're sitting there prosecuting Paul. I think it's extremely dangerous. And I really see that people that have done that, I can see how that is not working out very well for them, unfortunately. And it's turned into a spiral effect, like Rob says, and I want nothing to do with it. I absolutely want nothing to do with it. If questioning Paul or putting or saying anything false about Paul leads to throwing out the entire New Testament, and using scholarly work to justify your position of throwing out the entire New Testament to make you feel better about your decision, it's just I want absolutely nothing to do with it. But as far as just kind of just retouching on this separation falling away that's happening, or it's happened for 2,000 years, but it's happening again, this resurgence. Imagine the Father wakes up thousands of people, like Rob said, 2009, it's like the blinders come off. For some people, it happened right away. Unfortunately, some of us are on this later reaping, I guess you can say, of coming back to the truth. But imagine thousands of people, and who knows what the real number is. I mean, it could be tens of thousands. Maybe there is hundreds of thousands of us around the world right now. Still a lot of people. And you don't think that the devil's going to try to get into that? Of course he's going to. That's his job. And what we're seeing is the parable of the seeds happening right before us. And let me just read the explanation part of the parable of the seeds, so a lot of us know how the seeds were sown.
Is there a particular verse? I'll pull it up for you too.
Oh, okay.
What's the chapter and verse?
I was going to read Matthew 13, 18 through 23.
18 through 23?
Mm-hmm.
All right, you got it. Let me just pull it up for you. Hang on for just a second.
While she's getting that, I'm saying it like they live, like we out here with. While she's getting that verse, wow, Rob, bro, he dropped the bomb for sure. He was on. You muted right now. He was on point with his breakdown.
Yeah,
I 100% agree with everything he said.
Absolutely. You see that actually, to be honest, when I realized when I was personally having issues with Paul and saying, I'm just gonna, disregard Paul, right? When I was personally having issues with that, I I thought to myself, I was like, well, Peter says Paul's legitimate. Luke says Paul's legitimate. So and the whole book of Acts, so I'd have to throw out Acts, I'd have to throw out Luke, and I'd have to throw out Peter, and then the rest of the Gospels legitimize Peter. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, well, then I'm gonna have. So for me, I was just like, well, I'm just gonna put that on the back burner because I'm not willing to throw out all this other stuff just because I might not know what Paul's saying. You know what I'm saying?
I think I think actually when I first watched this video, it was a part of my research because I was running into the same issue. I was running into the issue of questioning Paul and his writings and who he was and if he was legitimate, if he was a false apostle or not. But eventually I had to ask myself this question. And I believe that if you, no matter where you are with your understanding or where you stand on the subject of Paul, if you ask yourself this question, it'll kind of help you as a guide to figure out where Paul stands and where your understanding should fall on Paul, right? And what it was for me was when I read Paul's writings, no matter where it is, whether it's in Romans, whether it's in Ephesians or Galatians or any of the other epistles, right? If I find a verse or a series of verses or a chapter that seems that it is contradicting the Torah or that is teaching against the Torah, right? I pause, right? Like imagine if you are hiking in the wilderness, right? And you have those little locator poles, the little flags that kind of let you be able to retrace your steps. I treat it like that. I pause, I take a flag and I stick it there, right? And then I continue to read on. And if, as I continue to read on, it seems like it's continuously leading further and further away from the Torah, I stick another flag. And what I do is I go back to those flags and I ask myself this question. Like you said, like Rob said, if both Luke, Barnabas, Peter all endorse Paul, and if Paul endorses Messiah, but Messiah endorsed the Most High and the Torah, right? Then at that point, I have to go to those flags that I put down in the sand, in the snow, whatever, right? In the dirt. And then I had to ask myself, well, if all of these people endorse Paul and Paul is endorsing who is also endorsing the Torah, then I have to take a second look at those flags and examine to see exactly what they're talking about. Because whether you agree with Paul or not, if you are a believer, a true believer of the scripture, that it was ordained by the Most High, right? Holy and separated, ordained by the Most High, and is true, then you understand that the Bible can't contradict the Bible. And that one person in the Bible, if he's claiming to serve the Most High or is a follower of the Messiah, he can't contradict himself, and he can't contradict someone else who is also following the Most High or is a follower of the Messiah. And so when you look at it like that, like the scriptures is a sound, firm, solidified body of work. When you run into those small instances where it seems like it might be contradicting, those are the places that you need to focus on to really dive in and figure out what they're saying. Sometimes it's a translational issue. Sometimes it's a transliterational issue. Sometimes it's a contextual issue. Sometimes it's a historical issue. Sometimes it's a doctrinal or a denominational issue where, culture comes into play, history comes into play, your own personal biases and beliefs come into play. Like he said, people will run into it and their personal beliefs conflicts with the Torah, right? And then they don't know what to do. They come to an impasse, right? It could be a lot of different things.
And then a lot of times, people believe that they're what they've been raised believing. They believe that scripture. So they don't understand that that's not really what the so-called New Testament is saying, right? So when they get to those conflicts, they think that the New Testament is contradicting, and that because they've brought over their whenever we start coming back to the truth, we got to put everything we think we know on the shelf. You know what I'm saying? You got to take everything you think every church creed and every doctrine. Yep. You got to put that on a shelf, and then slowly you start to filter it through scripture and see what's true and what's not. Just like the Bereans did,
I always
When-
say you gotta take the lenses of whatever your current belief system or whatever your religion and current belief system is. You gotta take those lenses off, and you gotta look at the scripture with fresh eyes, brand new eyes, like you've never read it before.
Yep. That's exactly right. Exactly right.
I'll give y'all an example real quick. I ran into this situation a little bit too. This was before I left Christianity, so this was back in 2013. I was reading, I believe this was in like First Kings, Second Kings. I was in the Old Testament. And this was when the Most High instructed Israel to go into a specific location and kill everybody. Everybody, right? Now, I started my studies in the New Testament. Like he said, the Bible doesn't start in Mark. Well, for me at the time, it started in John. So I started with, my first book I read was Revelation, but that just kind of piqued my interest into learning the Bible. But I started in John and studied through the Gospels. And when I finished the Gospels, I read them again. When I finished, I read them again. So I had that type of understanding. And so going back and reading in the Old Testament and hearing how the Most High was just telling them to kill everybody, it did not sit right with me. It did not sit right with me. I'm like, how is it the Most High, who is supposed to be of love, instructing this group of people to go in and slaughter everybody? Men, women, children, animals, everybody got to go, right?
Yeah,
so
in some cases, he even said burn their fields down.
So like me hearing that, I'm like, yo, like, I don't want nothing to do with this. Like this Old Testament stuff, I don't want nothing to do with this. Let me mosey my way on back to the Gospels. Let me get on back over here, you know what I'm saying, to Paul's writings and in the Gospels and everything like that. And I didn't want nothing to do with it. And this is how I know the Most High's truth is profound. Because even with the Christian understanding at that time and the mindset that I had, I reached out to my spiritual mentor at the time, who was also a Christian. He was actually a navigator, and he had to break it down and explain it to me. He said, listen, the reason why the Most High told Israel to go into that land and destroy and kill everybody was because he was dealing with a specific people. He was dealing with the preservation of that specific people. And so in order to preserve them so that they wouldn't be tainted, because that group of people, that body of people that they were supposed to go and kill, were doing all kinds of bad things, right? So, because if they went into that land and didn't kill them, they would intermingle with them. Those bad habits and bad practices and paganistic ways and stuff would rub off on the Israelites. And I'm like,
yeah, and then whenever you connect the Nephilim and you get the understanding of the Nephilim hybrid bloodlines, then it even becomes even more like he had to have them do that. If he hadn't had them do that, then it would have turned out way different.
Right.
You know?
And that's not even addressing the instructions in the Torah about not mixing with certain seed for that exact reason and stuff like that. But on a very basic level, a very many fundamental level, they would have basically just tainted the Israelites.
Yeah.
And that's all I needed. Because
then they wouldn't have been preserved, and then
correct.
The Torah never would have continued. The Messiah wouldn't have been able to have been born, and so on and so forth, and then we'd all be doomed. It's just like with the flood, and Noah being preserved and his children.
Yep.
That was actually, believe it or not, I know it sounds like so heinous to wipe out everyone on earth, but when you realize what was going on before the flood, that they were mixing species, mixing the angels and the Nephilim, you had all flesh was corrupted. It says in Genesis 6 that all flesh was corrupted. So it was actually an act of mercy to do that, because if he hadn't done that, then eventually Noah's bloodline would have been, corrupted, and the Messiah couldn't have come. He waited until the the last 8 people that were preservable were there, you know, and it was actually, as bad as it sounds, it was actually an act of mercy, because had he not done that, Messiah couldn't have even come.
Absolutely. So when you look at that, you know, I had to take my current understanding and put it on the shelf, take those lenses off, and that be able to receive what my mentor was trying to get me to understand, right? And like you mentioned with Noah, that's a great example, right? I think he might even use that, but I don't know. My memory don't. If memory serves me correctly, he probably did, but I don't know. But anyways, but then I was able to deal with the initial shock that I received from reading those various scriptures. And then I was able to go back and read them and to be able to actually understand the context and the reasoning behind it. And once I really, you know, was grounded in the preservation understanding of it, that justification outweighed my initial disgust, because women and children to me were innocent in that mindset. But that's a mainstream westernized perspective and mindset, right? That wasn't an easternized perspective and mindset. So once I was able to get over that hump, I was able to be like, okay, cool. Because initially I'm like, the Most High that I'm hearing about in the New Testament and in the Old Testament is not the same. But if I accept all of the Bible, then I remember where it says that he's the same today and yesterday and forever. He changes not, right? So if he doesn't change, then that got to be the same one. And if he is the same one, then there has to be a reason why they're talking about how loving and merciful he is here and why he's killing and doing all of this destruction over here, right? So if I don't agree with over here, I need to look at this and figure out why. And I was able to do that, right? And the same thing with Paul. Those flags I said you stick down, once you realize and understand why he's saying what he's saying and the context, the translation, the understanding, then you're able to reconcile it against the rest of the scriptures. And you realize that not only is there no change from the New Testament to the Old Testament in terms of a lot of this various conflicting doctrines, but Paul specifically, not only was he not teaching against the law, he was actually supporting and upholding the law. He was teaching you how to keep the law in a roundabout way from someone, like Joe said, the higher upper echelon type of prestigious college. From that level, imagine if a professor at a prestigious college who teaches rocket science, you know, in a college to college students, tries to come to you and have a conversation about math. You're gonna be like, what? What are you talking about?
He's gonna be pulling out all these derived equations. And,
exactly.
And, you know, you ain't even gonna know.
You ain't gonna know what he's talking about, right?
And there's prerequisites to get into such a class too.
Facts.
I mean, you can't just go into that class and be like, all right, I'm taking you know, astrophysics. You know, you've got to have prerequisite classes, you know. I mean, it's just like in high school. I mean, you can't take physics until you've taken algebra, right? Because you have to have the foundation before you get that. And that's essentially what people are doing when they start off reading Paul, because, you know, in general, you get these little tracts, or some street preacher comes up to you and starts telling you about Romans Road and all this kind of stuff. And then he's like, all right, now let's go and read let's go read through all of Paul's epistles. And it's like, well, you don't have the foundation yet. You don't have the you know, you don't know how to, you know, multiply and divide yet. How you gonna be computing all these equations and stuff?
Exactly. And that perfect example, brother. Thank you. So if you if you understand that Torah is essential, learning the Torah is the first step. That's that baseline fundamental level, right? But then once you get from that, you go to memorizing certain sections of the Torah, and that's the next level. And then obviously you have various levels within that to how much you can memorize. But memorizing the whole Torah, that's like that upper level. But once you get to that level, guess what? There's still room to grow, because once you understand, once you know the Torah, you memorize the Torah. Once you
then you got the prophets and the writings, you know.
Yeah, but if you're just talking about the Torah specifically, once you understand the Torah, right? Like I'm gonna give you a small basic example of understanding the Torah. Torah says not to eat pig, right? Okay, well, you can say, okay, I learned the Torah in that regard. I don't eat pig. So I follow the Levitical dietary laws in Leviticus 11. I know pig is wrong because the Torah said it's wrong. And I can actually memorize those various scriptures that says that the pig is unclean to eat. That's another level up, right? But then when you actually do your research and you look into the pig and you realize why it's unclean, that's another level of understanding. Pigs don't have sweat glands. So all of the toxins that they get, you know what I'm saying? It gets trapped within their meat and their flesh. They can, what's the word? Excrete?
Excrete,
Yeah. They can excrete a certain amount from the bottom of their hooves, but all of the toxins in their body could not possibly come out from their hooves, right? Us, we have sweat glands. So not only do we sweat to regulate our temperature, but we also sweat to get rid of those toxins and stuff out of our bodies. Pigs can't do that, right? So that's one thing, right? Then when you look at a pig's diet, a pig will literally eat anything.
Yeah, they'll eat their own feces. I mean, it's
right. And so, that's just the pig's anatomy.
And their digestive system. Like their digestive system is so like it's designed to put it through as fast as possible, because otherwise, you know, they get so toxic, you know. So their digestive system is even very less involved than ours, you know. And as they digest this stuff, like most things, when they eat something, it takes a while before what they've eaten actually becomes meat on their bones. You know what I'm saying? But with pigs, it's like an hour or something after they've eaten something, it's already become meat on their bones.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So
you know
if they just ate a nice hot steaming turd, you know what I'm saying? It's like, you know,
it's meat on their bone.
And that's
you know what I'm saying? You just ate poop, bro. You just ate poop, sis. You know what I'm saying? You want to eat poop the rest of your life? No.
But like actually, like pigs, they get cancer and they get all these tumors and stuff. And I actually had read, and I know some people who worked at a sausage processing plant, and they said that they will take tumors and they will take cysts and pussy abscesses and stuff like that, and they'll just grind it up and put it in a sausage. So I mean, you like literally eating cancer. Like literally cancer, like you just pulled a tumor out of it and ate it. You know what I'm saying?
The standard hot dogs, I don't know if you guys knew this. I know this is kind of off topic, but standard hot dogs is literally the leftover remainder parts of the pig and other animals. So you're not even eating just solely pig or pork. You're eating a combination of all kind of stuff. And the cysts, the cancer, tumors, chopped up, everything. Once you take all of that, you combine it and you process it, and it comes out in a hot dog. You don't know what's in that hot dog.
Yeah.
Right. So understanding the pig's anatomy gives you that next level up of understanding of the Torah, what it's telling you.
Yeah, like why does he say that? You know,
why does he say that?
Because we know the Torah is for our good. You know, Absolutely. He gives us the commandments so that it will be well with us, right? Because he cares about us. He doesn't want us eating cancer and getting sick, right? And when you start to understand, there's actually reasons for everything he says. Maybe we don't understand what those reasons are, but there is reasons for it, right?
Absolutely. And then the next level up, and these could be interchangeable, obviously, but understanding your own anatomy and how your digestive system works and how pork and other types of unclean meat, according to Leviticus 11, will affect your body. Right? And how you realize that pork is super acidic, and eating pork and consuming pork is hard for your body to maintain its pH level, and you lose that state of alkaline. Alkaline is on a pH scale, anything that's higher than 7, right? And acidic, acid or acidity is anything that's under 7, right? So anywhere in the 6s and under, and then for alkaline is anything in like the high 7s and up, or you could say round it up to 8s, anything 8 and up, right? And that 7 area is that neutral area, right? But when you understand the pig's anatomy, what his body does, what it affects, how it affects your body, and then just the lifestyle of the pig and the long-term effects that it has on your body and your mind and different things, your spirit, it like, not even gonna say spirit, but all of those things, you're on that next level of understanding, going all the way back to the Torah of just simply telling you don't eat it. Then when you understand the spiritual complications of it, that's another level, right? All of these levels within this one instance, and that's what I'm trying to get you guys to understand. The word is a elaborate labyrinth of truth, and there's various levels to this truth. I say it all the time, right? So when you find Paul's writings in those certain instances, tread very carefully, take your time. And if you don't have that firm understanding of the Torah, don't go to Paul, because Paul is going to lead you to having some conflicted feelings and understandings and opinions, and you like they said, you might end up falling away and throwing a whole New Testament away, including the Messiah, and find yourself in that far left gutter, you know. So I think this is a really good stopping point for this portion of it. Obviously, according to the video, we only made it to the 35-minute mark, but we'll continue pressing on next Shabbat, and we'll get through this entire video, this entire lesson, and obviously we'll be giving various commentaries throughout. But this was a very good start. I'm really glad that you sent me this video, bro, because I didn't even realize I had saw it before, but I needed that, you know.
Yeah.
That refreshing. I'm getting nuggets that I hadn't even considered. And maybe the first time I watched it, my level of understanding wasn't high enough to actually get certain things. But yeah, absolutely. Toda.
Yeah,
Toda.
man.
You got anything you want to tell the people?
I think this will be a good thing to go through, you know, over the next few weeks, and you know, provide just to put it out there, you know, because a lot of these ministries that are really doing great things, you know, they're not as well known as they could be or should be, and I think it's good to be able to expose people to additional resources and information, and you know, I think as far as leaving it, we can leave it with, I think, what Peter said, where he said in 2 Peter, where is it, 3, 15, 16, and 17, he said, an account that the long suffering of our master is salvation, even as our beloved brother Paul also, according to the wisdom given unto him, hath written unto you, as also in all his epistles, speaking in them of these things, in which are some things hard to understand, which they that are unlearned and unstable wrest, as they do also the other scriptures, unto their own destruction. Ye therefore, beloved, seeing ye know these things before, beware lest ye also, being led away into the error of the wicked, fall from your own steadfastness. And the error of the wicked right there, that is, you could look it up yourself at some point, but it's the Strong's Concordance G113, and it is athismos, and it means lawlessness, right? So when he says the error of the wicked, he's saying the error of lawlessness. So he's saying, Peter's saying here, you know, Paul's our brother. He's not saying get rid of Paul. He's saying no, if you're unlearned, if you're unstable, you're gonna wrest or twist Paul's words to your own destruction and fall into the error of lawlessness, right? So Peter's saying here, don't fall into the error of lawlessness, right? And it's also interesting to note here that he says, as they do the other scriptures, right? So it's not just Paul that's being twisted. I mean, the Pharisees were twisting the Torah. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's not just Paul that's being twisted, but I think Paul is being used just as the Pharisees were twisting the Torah and the prophets. Paul is being used by the modern day Pharisees in churchianity to twist the true message of Messiah, which was, what did Moses say? You know?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because he is the lawgiver, as it says in James, I think it's 2. It says that Messiah is the lawgiver, so he's the one that gave the Torah to Moses in the first place. So you know, when you've got people saying, "Oh, I don't keep the law of Moses, I keep the law of Christ," you know, the so-called law of Moses actually is the law of Messiah. So I mean,
absolutely. Absolutely.
This
was 2 Peter chapter 3 verses 15 through 18 that he just read. Go definitely check out and read it on your own.
And I'll also go into just let me find a James, because I think that's important to that people realize. And I don't want to just say it. I'd rather have the scripture for it. So it's James 4:12. I was mistaken. It's 4:12, not 2.
James 4:12. Pull it up.
It's right here. There is one lawgiver who is able to save and to destroy. Right there, one lawgiver. So that indicates right there that, and then who is able to save and destroy. Obviously, Messiah is the only one able to save us, right? And he's the one lawgiver. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So all of these things are really important to take into account. This is going to be a really good series. They just started to crack like into that whole thing, right? But even the prerequisite like dialogue that they had was already profound. So I'm excited to see what else they talk about. Like I said, I've seen this before, but I don't remember it. So, you know, I'm sitting front row seat with my popcorn just like you guys are. But but with that being said, family, definitely like this video, share this video with other people, subscribe to the channel. If you have anything you would like to comment on the video or just message us, drop a comment below. We'll definitely get that answered for you. If you got any other ideas for future topics, definitely drop it in the comment. We'll definitely take it into consideration. And you can always reach out to us about certain topics via email, and we'll get set up with you and kind of get with you offline and have those types of conversations. I'm an open book, man. I love getting with people in the scripture, so definitely. And Professor S is the same way. So we here for you guys. That's why we make this content. You know, we just want to spread the message, spread the truth, and let people just get a closer relationship with the Father because of it. So thank you, brother, for the video, man. I appreciate it. And that's how I know it was from the Most High. Definitely, that's how I know it was from the Most High. So with that being said, family, y'all be safe out there. Take care and shalom. Shabbat shalom.
Shalom.
Heavy is the head. Giving y'all some bars from the throne.
Stand up. You are a king.
Yeah, I keep that thing close. Right next to the pistol, if I let that thing go. You got at least 66 issues, I be focused on the path. Tryna stay out the fire lake, and since Yasha is the money, then I'm in the green like a garter snake. I'm invested in these scripts. Deposit at the pinnacle, when since Torah is the academy. Profit all about the principle. Camp mindset so acute, them